A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is good to have you with us today. Coming up in just a couple of moments, Ryan Petty is going to join us. His daughter Alaina was murdered at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and since then Ryan is a man on a mission. He does not want to see similar attacks in schools around the country, and he is gravely concerned about the growing chorus calling for an end to school resource officers in public schools around the country. So we'll talk with Ryan Petty coming up here in just a matter of moments. Do have a couple of headlines to get to before we get started. We do now know the date for a special session in Virginia coming up on August 18th. Lawmakers are going to return to Richmond. Governor Ralph Northam announcing that date on Friday. We don't yet have a specific agenda. Governor Northam said he wants to deal with some budget issues regarding the coronavirus, falling tax revenues, and now they've got some budgetary holes to fill. But he also said that he wants to deal with police reform and, quote, social justice issues. So does that mean that we're going to see an attempt to bring back House Bill 961? That is Governor Northam's sweeping gun ban, magazine ban, suppressor ban. Nothing official, but the chances are good that we are going to see another go at this gun ban coming up in August. So make sure that you are paying attention right here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. We'll bring you all the latest details. Also, if you are a Virginia gun owner, I want to let you know that the Virginia Citizens Defense League has a widget at their website. And you can go there and you can actually contact your lawmaker, your state delegate, your state senator right there from the VCDL website and tell them no to any attempts to infringe on our right to keep and bear arms during this special session. Now, it's important to note that earlier this year, 4 Democrat state senators, all of them on the Senate Judiciary Committee, voting against House Bill 961, but they were not opposed in theory to a so-called assault weapons ban. They were opposed to the specifics of this proposal, but I am guessing that in the coming weeks, there's going to be some attempts to try to sweeten this legislation enough that these lawmakers will support it. And if the sweetening doesn't work, then there might be an attempt to play hardball with some of these lawmakers and say, listen, it'd be a real shame if projects in your district just, didn't get funded or maybe, look, we're looking at budget cuts. I mean, if it happens in these rural districts, boy, it happens in these rural districts. There's a lot of pressure that Democrats can put on their colleagues to force them to go along. So, again, keep your eyes on that as well in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, in St. Louis, Missouri, Kim Gardner, the prosecutor there, the circuit attorney, still weighing charges against Mark and Patricia McCloskey, but Governor Brad Parson raising some eyebrows over the weekend after he said on a interview Friday with St. Louis talk show host Mark Cox that he was considering a pardon if any charges are actually presented. And if the McCloskeys were to lose their case or be convicted of any crime, he said, obviously, you got to see where the facts take us. But right now, based on the facts that we know, he said he does not anticipate the McCloskeys spending any time behind bars. Whether or not that has any impact on Kim Gardner remains to be seen. In fact, it might encourage Kim Gardner to go ahead and file charges against the McCloskeys. She is up for re-election this fall, and she's got a primary coming up in August. So why not take on the governor? Why not take on the president? Why not take on Missouri Senator Josh Hawley and others who have condemned any attempt to prosecute the McCloskeys? Kim Gardner can raise her profile, make a little bit more of a name for herself, and appeal to the far left that'll be voting in that Democrat primary coming up in just a few weeks. So that's a look at a couple of the stories that are going on around the country right now. One story that is not getting, again, I don't think as much attention. Maybe it's just because we're in the summer months. Maybe it's because so many of us are unsure what school is going to be like for our kids when it does start back in session here in just a few weeks. But there is this continued push to defund school resource officers, to get rid of police on school grounds. Had the opportunity to speak about this with our friend Ryan Petty, whose daughter Alaina again, was murdered at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School back in 2018. We also had a chance to ask Ryan Petty about this bizarre editorial by the South Florida Sun-Sentinel endorsing former and disgraced Sheriff Scott Israel for re-election. They've got a primary coming up in just a few weeks in Broward County, Florida. 6 folks running, including the acting sheriff, but Scott Israel wants his job back, and the South Florida Sun-Sentinel says, yeah, voters should give it to him. That's where we started with Ryan Petty. Take a look and a listen. Ryan, it's so good to talk to you again, sir. Thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me, Cam. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. We saw this surprising editorial, tone deaf, I think is the phrase that I really want to use here. South Florida Sun-Sentinel last week coming out and endorsing the idea of Scott Israel, the disgraced former sheriff, saying that he should run again. That the position is open, and despite his failures, they actually say that he should be back in office. What is going on there, Ryan?
Cam, a long time ago, I stopped being surprised by what happens with the political machine in Broward County. Look, a tremendous disservice, I think, to the residents of Broward County who legitimately deserve to have a sheriff that has their best interest at heart, that will train the deputies to do the right thing at the right time and to protect the public. Right now, it would appear the Sun-Sentinel has decided that their political beefs with Governor DeSantis outweigh their responsibility to the residents of Broward County. It's quite frankly unbelievable.
I mean, it is, considering the fact that the paper itself, I think, has done a pretty good job of covering Scott Israel's scandals. I mean, that's what's kind of shocking. I assume that the editorial board has read the reporting that the paper has done, and yet there are, I guess, 6 Democrats that are running here, and they can't find anybody that they think would do a better job than Scott Israel. What does that say about the crop of candidates running for sheriff on the Democratic side of the aisle?
Well, first it says, I'm not sure the editorial board's reading their report. And not only that, I'm not sure they're reading previous editorials where they excoriate Scott Israel for the job that he didn't do, which led to the tragedy and exacerbated the tragedy at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. And certainly the failures at the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting were also clear failures of leadership. And this is something the Sun-Sentinel editorial board should understand. They should have reread their own reporting, reread their own editorials before they put this out. The courageous thing to do, if they just, for whatever reason, can't get behind the current sheriff, who I think is doing a phenomenal job, Sheriff Greg Toney, new training, new emphasis on holding deputies accountable, good community-oriented policing going on there. And, if for some reason they couldn't get behind him, they should have just kept quiet.
Well, they didn't do that, so I suppose we'll see here. When is the primary? It's coming up next month, right?
Yeah, it's in August. I don't want to get the date wrong because I don't want to mislead any potential voters out there that need to get out and exercise their right to vote and vote for the sheriff that they think will best protect them. But it is in August, and I wish Sheriff Greg Toney the best in pulling through. Quite frankly, the Democratic primary will decide. Because of the politics in Broward County, the Democratic primary is the de facto election.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes on things. And, and in the meantime, Ryan, I want to ask you about something that's taking place nationwide, and that is this discussion, and in some cases votes already, to remove school resource officers from school districts. I'm looking at an op-ed. This was published just a couple of days ago at Education Week. Defunding school police, rather, does not go far enough, they say. Not only do we need to get police out of schools, but they say that we need to talk about school disciplinary issues. I mean, how troubled are you watching what's going on around the country? Big school districts like Los Angeles Unified School District pulling, $25 million of the school resource officers' budget. Minneapolis ending their contract with the Minneapolis Police Department, and a number of other big cities talking about simply removing all school resource officers altogether.
Boy, Cam, I can't believe I'm sitting here and we're having this discussion, quite frankly. I thought it was without question that school resource officers contribute positively to the schools they serve, not only in protecting them from active shooter attacks, but just improving the climate and culture of our schools. And quite frankly, they've been a positive. The research clearly shows they've been positive in their interactions with students and addressing many of the concerns brought forward by these activists who are pushing this defund the police agenda and trying to take advantage of the current discussion around defunding the police to try to get something done that they've wanted to do for years, which is remove school resource officers, from our nation's schools.
Yeah, so their argument is basically what? That school resource officers actually cause more trouble than they quell, right? That it creates a school to prison pipeline, that you've got students who, might face a suspension or maybe a detention, but instead are now being brought up on criminal charges. And if you get the school resource officers out of the schools, then that type of stuff stops. Is there any merit to that argument?
There really isn't, and I'll point to some research that I think is actually controverts their point entirely. So first of all, just looking back at Department of Justice statistics, as the number of school resource officers in the country has increased, the level of juvenile arrests has decreased substantially. This is a report put out by the National Association of School Resource Officers citing DOJ statistics. They show a significant decrease in the number of juvenile arrests. While it doesn't prove causality, there's a strong correlation between more school resource officers and fewer juvenile arrests. And I think I can explain that in just a moment. So that's the first thing that we need to point out. The second is the activists, I think, like to conflate juvenile arrests, school to prison pipeline with discipline in schools. And it's never been the role of the school resource officer to be the disciplinarian in our schools. That's fallen to the educators and administrators in our schools who, in many cases, and we saw this in Broward County where my daughter was killed, an abdication of that responsibility, walking away from, in many cases, and I put this squarely at the feet of the administrators. I think our teachers do the very best they can in the situations that they're put in, but often they have large classes. They have unruly students, and it's not difficult for one or two students that aren't there to learn to completely disrupt the education environment for the rest of the students in that class. And administrators have not done their jobs in ensuring that there's an environment where students can learn. That, unfortunately, is all being blamed on SROs and the police by the activists who really in my view, don't understand how the system is supposed to work, or B, deliberately choose not to understand how it's supposed to work and conflate the two issues.
Yeah, and there's probably a little of both going around here, but I'm a little concerned that these are folks who are willfully ignoring this data because it doesn't fit their agenda. And, ultimately what they want to see are not just police-free schools, but again, as weird as it sounds to say it, a police-free society, or at least a quote-unquote reimagined police force. So if this happens, Ryan, and I know that, a lot of school districts right now, they're debating, are we going to have in-person classes in the fall? Are we going to try to do this all virtually? We may see in the first semester that a number of schools don't have a large number of students there, physically speaking. But is this push to get rid of school resource officers? I mean, what are the negative impacts? What are the negative consequences going to be in districts that do this?
Well, first, I think one of the big impacts will be the opposite of what the activists are saying. So there's some research, Cam, that I've shared with you, a research report that actually shows that SROs reduce the school to prison pipeline. And if you'll share that with your viewers, as we present this piece today, I think that's really instructive. And the reason for that, according to this research, is that educators tend to, when they do enforce discipline, they tend to go to the extreme, or they tend to take a fight and put it into the criminal justice system, or I should, more precisely, the juvenile justice system, where an SRO, with their additional training and understanding of that school environment, tend to do a better job in, for lack of a better term, adjudicating what happened there. And you see a lot fewer kids being introduced, as it were, to the criminal justice system. So that's interesting research. And I think the other really deleterious effect that we'll see is a worsening of the school climate and the environment where our students feel safe as a necessity. We all remember Maslow's hierarchy, right? If you don't feel safe, you can't learn. And educators have made such an argument about students needing to be able to eat, right, and not feel hungry to be able to learn. Well, they also need to feel safe. And there's some interesting research this week out of your neck of the woods, University of Virginia, the Curry School. And just to, I'll look down at my papers for just a moment, but they surveyed student perceptions of school resource officers. 67.5% of Black students said that the school resource officer makes them feel safer at school. 73% of Hispanic students and 75% of white students. Those numbers they fly in the face of what the activists are saying. Students across the board feel safer with a school resource officer. When it comes to issues of fairness, 69% of Black students believe students are treated fairly regardless of their race or ethnicity. These are not numbers that you're hearing from the activists. What you're hearing from the activists are I don't feel safe at school with the school resource officer. That flies in the face of what over 100,000 students in the state of Virginia recently said. And Cam, just to finish out, 86% of teachers and 93% of administrators feel safer with an SRO at school.
Again, those numbers are surprising, Ryan, because we don't ever hear anything like that. And I mean, I guess that gets to the point of the media pays attention to the people who are making noise. And the people who are making noise are generally the people who are unhappy with the status quo. And so we get this sense, right, just looking at the media coverage that, oh my gosh, there's this huge groundswell of opposition. When actuality, I mean, what it sounds like is no, most folks are actually satisfied. They're happy. They like the fact that there are school resource officers there, as you say. They believe that students are treated fairly. So what do we do to get that majority to make some noise so the media pays attention to this type of stuff?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this, and it goes back to, a lesson I learned very painfully on February 14th of 2018. Parents have got to stand up and get involved and got to make their voices heard. They've got to, if we're going to make decisions based solely on emotion and feelings, then your feeling as a parent that your child is safer with an SRO is every bit as valid as an activist who stands up and says that an activist parent, if you even, that says they don't feel their child is safe. If we're going to base decisions on feelings, then your feelings are every bit as valid, and you need to stand up and say so. What's at risk? Look, the last United States Secret Service study of school violence, 41 incidents of school attacks, only one was stopped by responding law enforcement out of the 41. And that was because that responding law enforcement agency was already on campus, and they were able to stop the incident of violence. We know that school resource officers are not only a deterrent to school violence, they improve the climate of culture in our schools, and they create an environment where your child feels safe and is able to learn and maximize their potential. Parents, you've got to stand up. Get with your parent-teacher organizations. Petition your school boards. Talk with your school administrators. Make sure that in your district, your voices are heard. You may not be the loudest initially, but you can certainly go out and force. And if we're to believe the numbers, Cam, that I just mentioned from the state of Virginia, I think these are reflective of states across the country. The vast majority of parents want SROs to stay in school. They need to wake up, understand what's at risk, and get out and make sure their voices are heard.
Absolutely. Ryan Petty, thank you as always, sir, for coming on the program today. It's really good catching up with you. I so greatly appreciate this information. I'm actually going to be passing on that UVA study to my local lawmakers because we have a special session coming up here in Virginia next month. Governor Ralph Northam's called it, and they're going to be addressing all kinds of things, including what the governor says will be police reform and social justice issues. So we may very well see an attack on school resource officers here in the state. And I want my lawmakers to have this information and this evidence, when that debate begins. So again, thank you so much for everything that you do, and I hope we get a chance to do this again very soon. Yeah, I thought that was absolutely some fascinating statistics that Ryan talked about, particularly out of the state of Virginia, where again the narrative is, well, nobody wants these cops in schools. Well, actually, yeah, majority of students, Black, white, Hispanic, say, yeah, we actually like having these officers here. Yeah, we think they treat us fairly. Yes, it makes us feel safer. Again, this is something that I think will be broadly ignored by the media. As I said, it's those loud voices that get the most attention, even if they're not a majority. And so you may think, well, I don't want to see anything change, but I'm not, what do I do about that? Well, as Ryan said, you speak up, you stand up, you make your feelings known as well. Because if you don't, then all anybody hears are that loud minority of voices calling for things like defunding the police, removing school resource officers, even though, as Ryan said, as we've had more school resource officers, we've actually had fewer kids end up in the criminal justice system, which I thought was the whole point, that and, less crime and safer schools. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report as well. We'll start there with a story out of Montgomery, Alabama. A man awaiting trial on 5 rape, 7 sodomy cases, now facing another rape charge just a month after he was freed on bond. The Montgomery Advertiser says 27-year-old Terrence Terrell Keaton was arrested on Wednesday afternoon in connection with a new charge. He allegedly had held an 18-year-old at his home on July the 9th when he raped her between the hours of 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. The victim denied his advances several times, according to court records. There were, and again, these earlier cases date back to 2016. But apparently, the trial had not yet taken place. He was released from jail in early June after a judge removed the cash stipulation from his bond in 5 first-degree rape and 7 first-degree sodomy cases from 2016. So in other words, didn't have to put up any money to get out of jail on these cases. He was ultimately indicted on those charges in 2017, set for trial on several occasions, according to the Montgomery Advertiser, but the trial was canceled amid the COVID-19 pandemic to be rescheduled at a later date. According to court records, Keaton is accused of raping 5 different women. In at least 2 of the cases, he held the women at gunpoint while he sexually assaulted them. In one case, he forced the victim to drive to a dead-end street, threatened her with a gun, and then held her down during the incident. Keaton maintains that the encounters were consensual. He says that a detective at the preliminary hearing withheld, quote, important information. Keaton says, yes, he did have a firearm. He had a concealed carry permit, but that no gun was around during the alleged consensual acts. In a second letter to a different judge, Keaton said that he had text messages between him and 2 women when they apologized for lying about the incidents. When Keaton got his phone back from police, he said the messages were gone. Okay, well, let's look into that. Let's absolutely look into that. I will say, however, that Keaton's defense is a little undercut by the fact that he's now accused of another rape that occurred after he was released on bond. And it sure does sound like there are some similarities between this alleged rape and the ones that he is still awaiting trial on that occurred allegedly back in 2016. Our armed citizen story of the day from Biloxi, Mississippi, where an intruder was shot and killed by a homeowner over the weekend. It was July 19th, about 1 o'clock in the morning. WXXV says Biloxi Police Department got a 911 call in reference to a shooting at a home on Old Bay Road in Biloxi, Mississippi. Caller advised that someone was trying to get into the home and a family member had shot that intruder. Police arrived. They found a male deceased in the backyard of the residence with an apparent gunshot wound. The initial investigation, according to WXXV, indicates that the deceased was breaking into the residence when he was confronted by the homeowner. During that confrontation, the deceased was shot. Family members immediately called 911. There have been no criminal charges filed. The investigation is still ongoing. We'll try to bring you any details as they become available. And finally today, not our armed citizens, I don't know where my head is today. It's a Monday all day today, isn't it? Our good deed of the day. That's what I'm trying to get to. From New Jersey, where a doctor from Pennsylvania actually saved a 3-year-old who was drowning in a hotel pool. This happened in Montvale, New Jersey on Saturday. Family member removed the drowning child from the shallow end of the pool, still about 3 feet deep, according to police. And Dr. John Blundell, who was visiting New Jersey, I said from Philadelphia, he was actually from Pennsylvania, he was actually from the Buffalo, New York area. He just happened to be there. He was able to perform CPR, revived the young boy before first responders ever got there. Montvale officer Scott Gaston, less than a minute from the scene, when he was dispatched, administered oxygen, covered the boy as other officers also entered the scene. He was taken to Valley Hospital in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Police say, quote, "It is incredibly fortunate that the doctor was in the right place at the right time." And I would add willing and able to help revive that child. We thank that doctor from Buffalo, New York for his very, very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. We will be back tomorrow with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you never miss a program. Also, Bearing Arms Cam & Company on Apple Podcasts or any of your fine podcast platforms. And you can also become a VIP Gold member of Town Hall Media. You get exclusive analysis, commentary, live chats, and more. You can become a VIP member of Bearing Arms or a VIP Gold member of all of the Town Hall websites. Coming up Wednesday, 12:30 Eastern, for our VIP Gold members, I will be doing a live chat with my friend Ed Morrissey from Hot Air. That's again coming up at 12:30 Eastern on Wednesday. Hopefully we'll see you then. Until then, well, actually until tomorrow, be well, be safe, be free. We'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.